Well, Think Like a Horse, Lessons in Life, Leadership, and Empathy from an Unconventional Cowboy. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon and welcome to the Prudent Money Radio Show. I'm your host, Bob Brooks. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, what can we learn from working with horses? Today, Grant Golliher, owner of the historic Diamond Cross Ranch, is here today to give some life and leadership lessons. And from his book, Think Like a Horse, Lessons in Life, Leadership, and Empathy from an Unconventional Cowboy. Well, Grant, welcome to Prudent Money.
Hey, thank you, Bob.
I got to tell you, Grant, I'm fascinated by your book. Talk about what happened to lead you to write this book.
Well, I've been a horse trainer for my whole life, really, professional for over 40 years. I grew up with horses and all that, and so I learned all that part of it. But really, in the last 25 years, here on the ranch, we were just looking for an avenue to raise our income because ranching is tough, and it's hard to make a living in a tough place like this. And so we were approached by Microsoft to do a private rodeo, and we did that for 300 of their executives. It went very well. And out of that, corporate groups began bringing their people to the ranch to see my demonstration of working with a wild horse or a young horse, untamed horse. And, I just challenged people to see what life lessons they could get from it, because those were some of the challenges that I had been given by a couple of mentors that I had, like, don't just think of it as a way to train a horse, but really the life lessons that you get from it. So it was just really word of mouth how we got going on the ranch, and it's expanded. We've had business and corporations from all over the country come in the last 25 years, thousands of people, and they just said, "You need to write a book. When are you going to write a book?" So we decided that we better write a book.
Well,
and that
tell
was,
me,
12 years ago.
12 years ago. Well, tell me this, Grant. How just out of curiosity, how more effective has this made you as a horse trainer?
Well, I think it has helped me just think about some of the concepts. And, honestly, Bob, over the years, it used to be about the horse, what he could do for me,
Right.
The buckle he'd win or the prize money he'd win for me, and how it really stroked my ego. So he was more a tool for me, but over the years it's become more about the relationship I have with my horses that I cherish, and not so much what they can do for me, but what I can do for them. So certainly has helped me over the years. I think it's the little things that we learn that make the big difference.
Yes. Well, tell me this. What has a horse taught you about having that feel or that gut instinct in certain situations?
Well, if you ever been kicked by a horse, you know what happened. You know what it felt like just before you got kicked, because you don't forget when you get kicked by a horse. If you ever been bucked off a horse, you never forget the feeling that horse gave you just before he bucked you off. So you really learn, to have that feel of what something's about to happen before it happened, and that's on the negative side. But when you really learn to feel as a horseman too, when the horse is about to make a positive change, you start to reward him ahead of time. I mean, you start to release pressure when he's thinking about doing the right thing, not just doing the right thing. So it makes him feel good. It builds on his self-esteem, and he becomes a willing partner rather than a forced animal that's just, more of a servant.
What if someone one of the listeners was thinking, boy, I just don't have that gift. That's a gift. That's something I can't learn, but it's just so very important in business. What kind of advice would you give them?
Well, I think we can all learn. I mean, that's why we wrote some of the stories about different horses we've worked with and different people we've worked with, because we tried to have a real variety, everything from abused horses and abused people right on up to, the horses and the kids that have been raised right by a family and then never been abused, because we work with all types. But we've just gotten feedback from business leaders and corporate heads and CEOs here about like, oh yeah, that's me. I push too hard and I don't release when I need to. I can see that now, or even that I know I'm not firm enough with my boundaries. I let them slip, so people get away with things, and I have to get all tough and get after them in a harsh way. So it's just the little things that we need sometimes to tweak that make us better. And the example of the horse is we really see that. So that's what we tried to do in the book, Think Like a Horse, is to show those things where people can see themselves and say, yeah, if I could just make that little change right there, honor the slightest try, or, the smallest change, or reward the positive, but still be strong enough and willing enough to show there's a consequence for wrong choice. So these are just some of the things that we've learned. I will just make a little quote from one guy I learned a lot from personally, was the CEO of Intuit Corporation, Brad Smith. He's retired now, but he worked with us several times, and his people loved him. They were very loyal to him, but he used to say that don't mistake kindness for weakness.
So true.
And that was very good, because he's obviously a very kind man, but that's also a strong leader. So we're trying to find that balance, of love and discipline, I guess.
Sure. No, Grant, I love this whole concept of pressure and release. It kind of tell me if I'm off base here, but it kind of reminds me of that old Stephen Covey principle: seek first to understand, then to be understood. If we seek control, or as you write in the book, if we don't release, we miss the opportunity to allow space for learning and response, which is so very important.
Yeah, I believe that, true control comes through freedom.
Yes.
And I just woke up with this one morning, and I believe it was the voice of God speaking.
Yes.
And it said, absolute obedience comes through total freedom. And that's what we do with the horse. We don't force the horse. We allow him to make mistakes. We allow him to move his feet because he needs to. We never trap him. We give him an escape route until it's his freedom to choose. We just set it up so we help him make the right choice, but we also allow him to make wrong choices and discover that doesn't work for him. So we're not telling him how he has to live. We're offering and asking him to take a look at our way. But if he has a better way that he thinks, then he can try that. But then we're there to show him that that's not the work by applying some pressure. Never abuse. It's just some pressure to show him that that's not going to work for him.
Well, now that leads me perfectly into the next question. Talk about what horses have taught you about. I love all that you wrote about boundaries. Talk about that.
Oh yeah, boundaries. It's a big word these days, but so important in our lives. But in training horses, it's really everything is about teaching them clear boundaries, and they show it to us. They have this going on in the herd all the time. They honor each other's boundaries, particularly the leaders. And so I have a little rope lesson I do with people. I put my rope across the center of the pen, and of course the horses, they don't want to be by the audience. So I have them clap and hoop and holler and make noise when the horse is on the opposite side of the pen. And when he finally gets running around, and he'll explore the pen and come across the rope toward the crowd, then I'll have them be quiet immediately. So kind of teaching the crowd the importance of being consistent with a boundary, how a boundary doesn't, the consequence of crossing a boundary doesn't have to be abusive anyway. It's just a pressure of some kind. And at the same time, they're helping the horse learn to face his fear of them and come close to them and not be afraid of noise. So there's so many things that the horse learns at the same time. But what it really emphasizes is how important being clear and consistent with our boundaries and never compromising those boundaries. Because if you do it one time with a horse, he'll always believe he can cross those boundaries. And that rope in this case is, that boundaries. But really, training a horse is just asking them to center up between your hands and your legs. And that's what a finished horse is. He's just your partner. He's one with you. Together, you're a team.
It would seem to me that, and you tell me this with the CEOs you've worked with, that probably not a whole lot of compromising goes on when it comes to boundaries. Is that a good observation or not?
Well, I don't know about that. I think sometimes there are. Personally, I've worked for people on ranches, ranch managers and things like that, and I feel more secure when I know that person is clear about his boundaries. He's not wishy-washy, like one day something's okay and you're getting away with it, and then the next day he just blows up at you and screams and yells at you, or fires you for that matter. There was no warning. So I think it can be both ways. I think they can be, compromising in their boundaries and then finally just blow up at you, or they can, be. I don't think you can be too clear with your boundaries.
Sure.
But you can be too harsh with your consequences, and particularly, you need to communicate those boundaries clearly before you are ever willing to criticize or punish, those that cross your boundaries. So it's really about communication as a leader.
Talk about, Grant, when you can see it between a leader and an employee. What about a coworker to coworker? Establishing those boundaries. How do you go about doing that without coming across the wrong way?
Well, I think it's really honoring each other's space. I teach people when I'm working with a horse here that I want the horse to honor my space, to respect my space, so he doesn't come barging in. Because a horse that's disrespectful can just come barging into your space, hit you with his head, which is big and hard, knock your hat off, break your glasses, step on your toe. So I just say I have a bubble around me, and I expect that horse to respect that bubble. And if he comes crashing into my bubble, he's gonna be met with, something, an elbow in the jaw or something, a rope. I would never strike out at him, but I will just say, hey, you're pushing on my boundaries. And of course, there's always body language that comes before that. But that's mutual. See, I don't just barge into a horse's space. I put my hand out and let him smell like you would shaking hands with a stranger. If he says, okay, you can come into my space, then I do. If he turns his head away and says, no, I don't want that, then I'll retract and start over and maybe ask in a different way. I don't just come barging into his. So we basically learn to respect one another, and that's a mutual relationship.
It came to me while you were talking that what horses actually put up with when just people who don't ride horses go on a vacation, they go out someplace where they ride them on a trail or something. Those horses put up with quite a bit.
It is amazing what they tolerate with us.
Tolerate. Good word.
Yeah, but that's no excuse for us not trying to do our best to understand them and get along with how they feel.
Well, the book, of course, is packed full of great leadership advice. Once again, the name of the book is Think Like a Horse, Lessons in Life, Leadership, and Empathy from an Unconventional Cowboy. Um, let's see. You said that make the right thing easy and the wrong thing difficult. How does that, first of all, talk a little bit about what that means, but also how that applies to horses.
Well, it's really the fundamental basic of this whole philosophy but again, it comes back to giving the horse the freedom to choose. So let's just say a horse wants to be at the barn, okay, which is a problem you always have with horse. We call it a barn sour horse, but they just have a herd mentality. They safety in the herd. When they're afraid, they run back to the herd. They don't want to leave the herd and go out, into the wild where there's scary things. So, we look at it as a negative. I try to look at it as a positive thing where the horse is drawn to the barn. So we do most of our work at the barn and make it difficult for them to be there when we're on their back, and then we offer them somewhere to go, and it's all their choice. So basically, you've made the wrong thing more work and the right thing less. And,
Yes.
Those first few rides on a horse, I get them to leave their pals and go out. I might just step off of them and pull the saddle off, let them eat a little grass, and let them know if they'll come out away from the barn and be with me, that's a lot better. So immediately that gets the horse thinking about, being with me rather than being in the herd, that I become his security, I become his place of peace, his safety, rather than the herd. So he doesn't get scared and run back to the barn. And that's just one example. But it's really giving the horse the freedom to make the choice, but setting him up to succeed.
Yeah, and I love that whole idea of giving freedom, a leader giving his employees freedom to make decisions within boundaries. And you say that this produces empowerment at every level. Talk about that.
Well, we've seen that, and I've had this discussion with leaders, team leaders, is if an employee knows that they're not just going to get beat up if they make a mistake, or embarrassed in front of all their peers, yelled at, then it encourages them to grow, to expand, to become leaders themselves within the company, and become more creative. So we've seen this as just being something that people are really grabbing a hold of now, is that thought that they have that freedom to do things and not make a mistake, and not get jumped on if they make a mistake. Of course it depends on whether they did something on purpose or not. But
Sure.
I've just seen this work with our own ranch hands so many times. You know how a leader or a boss always, wants to jump in and micromanage or take over when somebody's going to make a mistake. And of course, you set them up in a safe place where they're not going to, wreck the company. But that's really how you build confidence in them. And if you don't allow them to get out there and do it, they're not going to grow. They're just going to be stuck, and they're not going to be happy either. People aren't happy when they don't have any freedom to to have their own ideas. Plus, there's another thing that comes from that is communication. Is this listening to them and how are you doing there? What needs to change? I want to hear it. And when they say it, then you don't get offended and beat them up for it, because they got to feel safe in that environment.
The name of Grant's book, once again, is Think Like a Horse, Lessons in Life, Leadership, and Empathy from an Unconventional Cowboy. And I want to say one other thing, too, Grant, about your book, is that oftentimes when you give leadership advice, people assume, well, that book's about business. Now, it doesn't really apply to me. This is life advice. This is the way that I look at it. and it's applicable to any relationship that you have. I mean, and you can be a lot more effective with this type of advice. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, I do totally. This is not just for horse people or business people. This is for every parent, coach, teacher,
Mm-hmm.
a dog owner. At some point in your life, you're a leader. And if we don't get good at the little things, we're never going to be a great leader if we can't be a good small leader. So I think the lessons here help everybody. And we've just found, over the years, that this is probably more for non-horse people, city people, people that really aren't fortunate enough to be around animals like we are, that it can really help them.
A couple of phrases that I just want to just mention because we don't have time to go through them, but I just want to make sure that they get talked about. I love this phrase: "Your title makes you a manager. Your people will decide if you're a leader." And then you also talk about, and this I love this, the servant leader. One of my favorite phrases. I've got less than a minute. Talk a little bit about what that means, servant leader, to you.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, Brad Smith put it the best that I've ever seen, and he really focused on being a servant leadership. But if you're not helping those underneath you be as good and better than you, then you're not a very good leader. Really, with a horse, I may be his leader, but you think about it. I feed him. I trim his feet. I doctor him when he's sick. I take care of him. I groom him. I do most of the servant work. Yes, I ask him to work for me, and I ask him to give his very best. But I'm there for him when he needs me, and a lot more than he is for me. So, I've thought about that a lot. Really, I'm his servant more than his leader, but I do expect him, when I ask him to step up and do his best.
I want to squeeze one more minute out of this because I want to mention that your ranch, you rehabilitate a lot of horses who are considered throwaways. What got you into doing that?
Well, it goes way back when I was training polo horses, and I was looking for prospects, and there was a guy that had a huge. Well, he was the biggest, I'll just say it, the biggest killer buyer in Southern California. And so he had hundreds of horses, and they would end up getting shipped off to meet. Of course, he loved horses. He tried to find homes for them, but I could go there and go through all those horses and pick out horses and buy them for just a few dollars over meat price. So they were cheap. And so I was really looking, for potential. And so I ended up buying a lot of horses. Some are in my book that, I took home. They were scared to death of me or they had issues, but I was able to work with them and turn them around and making something valuable out of them and sell them for a lot of money. So it was really a business to me, but the satisfaction and gratification I got, and it's really a story of redemption. To me, it's a great story of redemption because, they were on their way, and it was, we say, one man's, what do I say? Thank you, my wife. One man's trash is another man's treasure, and they became my treasure. But it really is a lot of satisfaction. I'm not into rescuing horses so much as I'm looking for potential that people don't see out there. And, we've done it with people. And it's very gratifying.
Well, Grant, listen, congratulations on your book, Think Like a Horse, Lessons in Life, Leadership, and Empathy from an Unconventional Cowboy. It was a pleasure to have you on the program, and God's blessings to you.
Hey, thank you, Bob. I appreciate it.
Once again, the name of that book is Think Like a Horse, Lessons in Life, Leadership, and Empathy from an Unconventional Cowboy. I will tell you this. Have never come across a book quite like this, but it's just jam-packed full of great life and leadership advice. Hey, this is Bob Brooks. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in because we are all out of time till we do meet again next time. Keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.